welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 442, and today's date is August 15th, 2014, and the title of this episode is DHS is now preparing for anti-government violence. Before I get started, I just want to thank all those people who donated to the X22report.com site. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. It keeps everything going, keeps the support for the server going, the newsletter system going, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we see that the Spanish debt has now topped 1 trillion euros. I guess, should we be clapping for this? This is unbelievable. The debt of all of these nations are continually increasing, and we've already heard that this cannot be sustained. Now, France is out there, and they are saying that we are done. We are no more are we putting austerity on the people. It's enough already, and it looks like France's finance minister sends tremors through European capitals with a defiant warning that his country would no longer try to meet deficit targets. The entire system is falling apart right now, and they don't know what to do. They're very worried about this. The EU saying we're going to have to figure something out, and the whole thing is crumbling and falling apart. Now, Canada seems like they're having the same problem as the United States. You know, those manipulated unemployment numbers? Canada released a jobs number that was simply put to it's a complete disaster. Instead of creating the 20,000 jobs analysts had expected, the country's Statistics Bureau reported that a tiny 200 had been added in the month of July, following a drop of 9,400 the month before. These are the numbers we don't see outside a recession. I just don't believe we are in a recession, coming from one of the officials there. So therefore, I would expect the full-time employment numbers to be much higher. And Canada employment increased by 41.7 thousand in July, according to the Statistics of Canada. And of course, the second attempt from negative 9.4 thousand in prior month. In fact, it was so high it surpassed the highest range of the forecast, which topped out at 41.4 thousand. Based on 20 economists. So we can see right now they're having the same exact problem. They're manipulating the numbers so much, and they're trying to correct it, and they're making these numbers go much higher than they normally would be. And we can see right now every single country, every single government is continually manipulating these numbers to make it fit what is going on in the world. And you know what? It's not working anymore. Everything is starting to separate itself. The unemployment numbers to the real economic indicators are really starting to spread apart. And I know in certain countries they're doing much better, or they're being told they're doing much better, but what's happening is this will spread from country to country to country, because basically it's the same system. And once the dollar goes down, which is the main currency, the reserve currency of the world, we're going to see a lot of countries start to completely collapse. And we know that the real estate markets have been pumped up, and I know many people in different areas and in different countries have been telling me that, you know, our real estate is fine right now. In other places they're telling me they're absolutely awful. But just like we saw in 2008, when things start to completely fall apart, everything just starts to fall apart, and it is a domino effect, and we're going to see this. Now, here in the United States, consumer confidence collapses to 9 months low. This is the biggest miss in over 8 years. The University of Michigan consumer confidence has collapsed to its lowest since November, missing the expectations by most since 2006. So we can see right now consumers are looking out saying, listen, I have hardly any money, I don't have a job, I'm underemployed, it's not working here. Now, Empire manufactured tumbled most in 2 years, falling by the most since June of 2012 to 14.69 from 25.6. This is the biggest miss in 4 months. Now, we've always talked about retailers, and we've been saying that they're having a huge problems. And when we normally see an economy improving, we see things expand. We see companies go out and they open up more stores, they hire more people, and we've only been seeing a contraction everywhere. And what we're seeing right now is a lot more retailers are starting to come up and say, you know what, it really wasn't the weather. Right now, Weak results from like Walmart, Macy's are the latest sign that these types of companies are not doing well and the consumers are not spending the money. A number of large U.S. retailers who cater to low and middle income consumers reported disappointing quarterly comparable sales this week, pointing to a cutback in spending and a shift in preferences to stores nearer to home. Kate Spade is reporting a drop in sales. Michael Kors is reporting a drop in sales. Fossil is reporting lower profits as declining mall traffic and a problem for many retailers. Noodles & Company, which is a full-service restaurant chain, slashed full-year sales forecasts. Red Robin gourmet burgers are reporting lower than expected quarterly sales. So this is just continuing, and they're really coming out now and saying, listen, we're out of this bad weather. We're out of the spring where we might have had a little bit of effect of the winter. We are in the summer heading into fall, and guess what? Sales are not going anywhere. Nothing has improved. But don't worry. The government gave us the GDP numbers, and they increased by 4%, which brought our GDP up all the way up to 6.1%. So everything is fine. And we know those numbers are completely manipulated to convince us that everything is absolutely fine. Now, John Deere is laying off 600 people at 4 U.S. plants, and these are going to be in Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas. And we can see right now the company reported a 5% drop in third quarter sales on Wednesday, and they're cutting their full year forecasts also. So we can see this is going from one company to another, and it's not stopping. The Fed is out there, and this is coming from the U.S. Fed official Fisher, said global recovery from the recession has been disappointing, adding that year after year we have had to explain from mid-year on why the global growth rate has been lower than predicted as little as 2 quarters back. Fisher warned some of the latest data show that there is no recovery in sight and world economic growth may well be slowing. Well, I'm going to say it's going to be a lot worse than that, Mr. Fisher. We are going to see this entire economy completely collapse as we go forward because everything that they've been telling us has been manipulated. These are not real numbers. The real indicators, the real economy are showing us that things are completely falling apart. And it's not just here in the United States. It's in Europe. It's in Canada. It's in Germany. It's in Australia. Everywhere we look, we see things getting worse. And of course, this is happening because the entire system is starting to implode. And it doesn't happen all at once at every single location. It moves across slowly, and each country then is affected as it moves. And this is why the BRIC nations, Russia, China, are separating themselves from what is going on. And Russia right now is taking steps to ensure that it protects itself from any future dollar or euro sanctions. Moscow boasts that the world's 5th biggest foreign exchange reserves and the 6th largest gold reserves. Due to the worsening geopolitical situation, the central bank actively redistributed foreign exchange reserves, replacing treasury bonds with gold. That is huge. So they're taking their treasury bonds, getting rid of them, they're dumping them, and replacing it with a hard asset, a precious metal, gold, to ensure the wealth of the country. Because they realize the dollar is collapsing, and we don't want to be holding these treasury bonds. Instead of buying euros and dollars, Russia's central bank is eyeing the Chinese yuan and Japanese yen. Boosting currency swaps and bilateral payments with China and other strategic trade partners will continue to bypass the U.S. dollar. Last week, Russia's and China's central banks have agreed to increase currency swaps. Other countries are also actively adding gold. Kazakhstan has added gold to their central bank, about 12 tons. And we're also seeing other countries like Germany, Italy, France, Spain. They're also either keeping their gold reserves or continually adding to it because they realize that they need to keep this gold on hand. The United States, very difficult to find if we are adding any type of gold to the reserves, and it seems like they're basing their whole entire economy on this currency, and this is going to be a losing battle. And of course they know this, and they're realizing that they're going to have to cover this up, and I've said this so many times already that this will be covered up with an event. And you can see from everything that we report on that this is really starting to ramp up, and we're going to see this actually really push forward as we move into the fall and winter. Now, it looks like the 1st National Guard troops are coming down to the Texas-Mexico border. The first wave is arrived, and they're taking up observation posts along the Texas-Mexico border. Several dozen soldiers deployed in the Rio Grande Valley are part of the 1,000 troops that were called up by Governor Rick Perry last month, and they are just supposed to keep watch, keep guard, push people back that are trying to get into the country. And of course, the United States government, the Obama administration, they want these borders wide open. They want the illegals coming in. They want all of this coming into the country. Why? Because the corporate people want this. The money people want this. They want cheap labor. They want them on the health care system where the government is giving them subsidies. They want all of this in the country. And of course, leaving the borders open allows them to say, oh, the borders were open because so many illegals will come over, and then all of a sudden terrorists came over the border too, and this is why we had this event. Now, it looks like because of this Ferguson riot situation, because of the shooting of Michael Brown, it is now spreading to other areas. Thousands of people in New York rallied in solidarity with residents of Ferguson on Thursday, showing support to people across the U.S. who have been victims of police brutality. The NYPD threatened mass arrests if people did not stop blocking traffic, and pretty much the people kind of ignored the police. They stayed in the streets. They didn't go back on the sidewalk. Some people were arrested, and it looks like this is continually happening all over the place. And a lot of cities now do have protests scheduled for this weekend. Now, the FBI warned local police that the new Black Panther leaders have flown into St. Louis for protests, and we can see that all of this is going to start to ramp up with the riots right now. Now, the riots and what's going on in St. Louis, in Ferguson, they're trying to calm the situation down. They brought the state police in, and it looks like the police officers are saying we should not be in military garb. We should be working with the people, and they're trying to calm the situation down. People should not be in fear of the police. The police are here to work with the communities, and this is how it began. But ever since, they become so militarized, we don't even recognize them anymore. They're in fatigues. They're wearing gas masks. They're holding assault rifles, and they use force on the people like the people are nothing. But don't worry. Al Sharpton is coming. He's going to make everything better. Al Sharpton warned Americans, do not be placated by the demilitarized situation among police forces in Ferguson, pointing out that the community was still deeply upset about the shooting of Michael Brown, an unarmed teenager. We're not out of this yet. We haven't even had the funeral, and once the people see his body, people might just go crazy, and we can see how this is all being fanned up right now. Now, it looks like they released the name of the police officer that shot Michael Brown. His name is Darren Wilson, and this looks like this was not a race thing. I know the corporate media is trying to build this up. This is about police brutality, about how the police are treating the everyday people of America. They treat them very harshly, and you can see from what was been going on in Ferguson. I mean, they were tear gassing news reporters, pushing people down, shooting them with their hands up. It made no sense whatsoever. Now, of course, it came out today that allegedly Michael Brown was in this robbery. Now, I looked at the video footage, and they're saying this is a strong-armed robbery. Well, a couple things in this video that really don't make sense, because it doesn't seem like this was a strong-arm robbery. I mean, we can't hear. There's no audio or anything like that. And all you see is Michael Brown leaning over the counter, and he has like all these different wrappers and packages. Now, they said he stole a box of cigars or something like that, but it didn't look like that, first of all. Second of all, I don't know what he was talking about, but it looks like they dropped some of it, and his friend put some back on the counter, and when Michael Brown was getting up, he said something to the woman that was standing next to him, and it looks like he was apologizing for being in her way, and then all of a sudden the owner of the store was coming out, and something happened where he pushed him. So we really don't know what this was about, and we can't really say it was a robbery. First of all, he's innocent until proven guilty. That's our justice system. So right now, we really don't know what's happening. But what's very interesting is that Michael Brown had no criminal record whatsoever, and this was coming from the police. So he never had a run-in with the police at all. And his teachers say that he never caused any type of trouble in school. His friends and family said he was very excited about attending college, and he was quoted in saying that he didn't want to end up like the people on the streets, and he wanted to go out and get an education. So we're looking at all of this, and a lot of it is not making sense. And one big thing is, why did the police wait 6 days to come out with this information? Why did they let the riots continually happening day after day and have the militarized police on the ground? What was the purpose in that? And that was basically to convince and to condition us for what is coming. Now, instead of shooting Michael Brown at the time, why didn't they taser him instead? Why did they have to pull out the gun right away? And again, when the call came in, the radio dispatch heard this information from the news that there was a shooting. Why didn't the police officer call this in? I'm looking at a suspect. He might have been involved in the robbery. We heard nothing of this whatsoever. So a lot of holes in this whole thing, and it's very interesting that they waited for 6 days to come out with this information. Now, it looks like there's a lot of cities around the country right now where they're going to have a solidarity vigils going on. A lot of them have been happening right now, and it looks like there's going to be quite a few in about 90 cities across the United States. And we're going to have to see if the FBI, DHS gets involved where they infiltrate the protest and put agent provocateurs in there and to try to really ramp this type of rioting up to declare martial law. Now, what's very interesting coming out of the Common Sense show with David Hodges, he says he has an informant from the Department of Homeland Security who are telling him a completely different story about what's been going on in Ferguson in the city limits. He's saying that rioting is taking place as far away as St. Charles, which is located approximately 20 miles away from Ferguson. Second, more people are becoming aware that the police chief of Ferguson, Thomas Jackson, is not in control of his own police forces as he has relinquished control to the DHS. DHS is fanning the flames of violence. Sources stated that DHS is running the Ferguson Police Department, and their actions are designed to antagonize and to provoke the locals to violence. He further stated that he believes that the ultimate goal is to inflame the local citizens to such a point of martial law that martial law will be declared. People from St. Louis have brought to my attention, this is to Dave Hodges' attention, that these events were rehearsed 2 years ago. And also Michael Snyder is out there with, and I have a link on this report here, that there was a training exercises for best practices for participating in protests. And these events in Ferguson are stepping stone towards ramping up the anti-government rhetoric. Now, what's very interesting about this is that a leaked document from Homeland Security was let out, and they are predicting a rise of anti-government violence, and they are getting prepared to handle this situation. A leaked document from the Department of Homeland Security Office of Intelligence and Analysis predicts increased anti-government violence over the next year. The document says the inspiration for violence is from the Cliven Bundy Bunkerville standoff with the Bureau of Land Management. DHS counts as a surge in militia and lone offender extremist events with an anti-government motivations and targets are things like the Alaska Militiamen, Waffle House plot in Georgia, Fear Militia, LA shooting, XXX Militia Splinter Group, Bunkerville Ranch, Texas Militia plot, Las Vegas shooting. And what they're saying is that these groups and individuals recognize government authority but facilitate or engage in acts of violence due to their perception that the United States government is tyrannical and oppressive. So what do you think they're getting ready for? They're getting ready for those people who don't agree with the government. But we have the First Amendment right that says that we can speak freely, and we have many other rights, and disagree with the government and say, you know something, you are not working for the people. Now, of course, they're saying that these groups, these anti-government groups, are getting ready to violently resist and overthrow the government. No, we are getting ready to peacefully march and express our grievances to the government. And what most likely will happen is the government will come down with a strong hand and use violence against the peaceful protesters, because what do we see and what are the actions of the government? What do we see at the Bureau of Land Management with Clive and Bundy? Well, they started using violence. What do we see in Ferguson? People walking with their hands up, and what did the police do? They used violence. When the people finally get fed up and say this government is not working for the people and we want them removed, and they go to Washington and they sit there for days and they have peaceful protests, the government eventually will use force on the people, and at that time people will have no choice but to defend themselves from the government. So what DHS is actually saying is they're getting ready to squash anyone that disagrees with government policy. And that's going to be a lot of Americans. It's not going to be all of them, of course, but we can see where they are headed, and they are getting prepared. And you can see right now, and I've said this many, many times, DHS has already infiltrated local law enforcement, and this is the prime example of how they did it. DHS was giving instructions to the local law enforcement in Ferguson. Look how they acted. Now take this and multiply it by every single city and state in the country, and this is going to be a complete disaster. It's going to be anarchy. And we can see where the government is headed. We as a people, we are peaceful. We are peaceful. We're saying, please step down. You're not working for us. We the people, we have the contract. That's why it says we the people on top. Our rights and everything, you're supposed to be working for us. And of course the people in power never like to step down. They like to keep their positions. We see this throughout history with kings and other government officials where they had to be overthrown, because this is the way it works every single time, and history is always repeating itself. Now it looks like Boko Haram is back in the news, and instead of kidnapping girls, this time they're trying that they've kidnapped 100 boys. So they're an international terrorist, they're bombing colleges, they're kidnapping girls, and now they're kidnapping boys. They're just trying to ramp this up so the United States has the ability to go into Nigeria. And they're trying everything they possibly can, and they're continuing with the propaganda. Now, this whole humanitarian aid that Russia is bringing to Ukraine has really gone haywire here. I mean, Russia's Ukraine-bound humanitarian aid was supposed to be processed at the Donetsk border crossing in Russia, and this was supposed to happen today at 10 a.m. local time, in Russian-Ukraine local time. The process of customs was begun at the Donetsk border crossing in Russia. Ukraine has 59 specialists, of whom 41 represent Ukraine's State Border Control and 18 employees from Ukraine's Customs Service. And of course, they opened up the trucks. They found absolutely nothing in there except for humanitarian aid. Now, this is kind of embarrassing because they kept the propaganda up that they were coming in with troops, military assets, and now this propaganda is falling apart. So what happened? Well, they decided to pretty much attack and destroy some of the convoy. Now they're saying, no, they destroyed a different armed convoy that was inside of Ukraine, crossing from Russia into Ukraine. And of course, where is the proof? Now I know there's a picture floating around the web of this APC vehicle on a road in the middle of nowhere with no markings or anything around it. This is not proof. This could be taken anywhere. The proof is to show the actual Russian vehicles, the destroyed vehicles with the Russian markings coming across the border into Ukraine. And if they had all this information, where is it once again? I mean, we've been down this road with Ukraine, and they love to give a lot of lip service. They love a lot of propaganda. They love to tell everyone that Russia's building troops on the border, but where is the proof? And until they show actual proof, there's nothing here to be to believe. Now, of course, EU is out there, and they're saying that this is against international law, and we're going to have to look into the situation, and there could be some type of military action against Russia. Russia is saying, we didn't bring any type of military assets into the country. There were no attacks. We actually caught agent provocateurs who were planning an attack on the convoy, and they were planning on destroying it and making sure that the humanitarian aid never reached the Donetsk and Luhansk area. So we can see a lot of this is going back and forth, and I hate to say it, Ukraine government does not have a good track record at all. Now, in Ukraine, as we know, their economy is falling apart. Their currency is devalued and imploding. They have no gas. We understand that Biden has his son on the board of directors of one of the gas companies. Kerry has someone on the board of the gas companies. And right now, Ukraine's parliament has passed a law that will allow foreign companies from the U.S. and EU to co-manage Ukraine's national gas transportation system, which has a value of around $25 to $35 billion, one of the largest in the world. Gee, you think this was all planned? The motion proposed by Yatsenyuk, who was put into place by these people, because it was a coup, and they placed their friends and the people they knew that were going to take orders from them to do exactly what they wanted in power, was only supported by 228 parliament members, just 2 more than the required 226. So it really didn't pass by a high margin here. Together with the Western investors, Ukraine is planning to create a new company that will control the country's gas transit system. Now, this is all the gas that goes through Ukraine out to Europe, and this would make them a fortune. And you can see why all the U.S. government central bankers are all getting in on this deal. But the only problem is that Russia is currently developing a transit system bypassing Ukraine's territory, which has proved unreliable as a transit partner. Russia is building 2 pipelines that do not run through Ukraine to deliver natural gas to Europe. The Nord Stream is already complete, and once the South Stream is complete, Ukraine's gas transportation system may lose more than 50% of its value because they're going to go around Ukraine, and these pipelines going through Ukraine eventually will become worthless, and they will not need Ukraine any longer. So, again, you can see this entire thing was a complete setup. They knew exactly what they were doing. They thought they were going to get the entire country with this coup. They thought everything was going to be great. We're going to have our people on the board. We're going to make lots of money from this. We're going to control all the gas going to Europe. This is going to be amazing, and that is falling apart now. Now, the people in Ukraine are very worried because of this purchase where the Ukraine Parliament allowed U.S. and EU to co-manage the country's gas pipelines. The people in Ukraine are saying, listen, this winter we're getting no gas whatsoever. We better buy firewood, coal, and anything we need right now, because this winter is going to be long and harsh, and we can see right now the Ukrainian government does not care about the people. They don't care about supplying gas, and this is exactly what you're seeing. The government central bankers do not care about the people. They only care about themselves and profit. That is it. They don't care about the rights. They don't care about if they freeze. They don't care about any of that. Now, what's very interesting out in Morocco, we understand that the president ordered the bombing to save the Yazidis from a humanitarian problem, because they were pushed into the mountainsides of Sinjar, and they had to go in and rescue them. But what's very interesting about this is that the 40,000 Yazidis stranded on the mountain, and that this was the cover story that they used to pretend that's why they had to go in bombing. Guess what happened? Well, they weren't really there. U.S. advisors got to Mount Sinjar, and there weren't 40,000 starving Yazidis stranded there. In fact, the indications are that there never were, and the Pentagon quickly dropped the rescue plan that they were planning. Well, what happened? Well, it turns out that the Yazidis already living on the top of the mountain, and while there were some refugees who fled up there, it looks like the Kurdish people, fighters, went there and rescued whoever were up there, but it wasn't the number they were talking about. This whole thing was blown out of proportion to convince us of this is why they were bombing. Now, what's very interesting, and if you really look at this, Mount Sinjar and Erbil are about 100 miles away, and they were bombing Erbil. Now, what's in Erbil, or Erbil, however you want to pronounce it? Basically, that is where the hub of the major international oil companies are. So what were they protecting? Their profits. That's what they were protecting. Yes, they did a couple of bombings in Mount Sinjar to make it look good, but most of it was 100 miles away. So this entire thing was completely fake, false, and phony. They lied to us once again. What were they protecting them from? The tribes of Iraq right now. That is what was going on. Now, it looks like they're trying to convince everyone that the Islamic State and the tribes are all one and the same here, and they're out there pushing the propaganda that the Islamic State, along with the tribes of Iraq, are trying to take over Baghdad. Well, yes, the tribes are trying to take back the country, which is being held hostage by the puppet regime, which is controlled now by the U.S. government, and they are making a run towards it. And of course, now they're trying to meld the two, which they will do to every single country across the Middle East. And we'll no longer hear Al-Qaeda, we will hear Islamic State, and that is the term they will end up using all over the place. Now, it looks like Ebola is pretty much spreading, and it looks like 5 illegal immigrants detained in Albania with Ebola symptoms. Montenegro and Bulgaria also have individuals in quarantine. And we can see that this is spreading, and it looks like in any of these cases, which are confirmed, there will be the first non-planned arrival of Ebola in Europe. So we can see that this is starting to spread a little bit. They're not confirmed. They have some symptoms, sore throat, fever, and things like that, but it looks like it's starting to spread. Now, it looks like the Islamic State, and this is coming out of the Washington Post, all the propaganda is coming out now, that the Islamic State terror organization believes that a conflict with the United States is inevitable. The 5 experts met with journalists on Thursday and revealed the ultra-violent Islamic State fighters are patient, well-organized, opportunistic, and flexible. The Islamic State of Iraq has repeatedly threatened the U.S., and earlier this month, a spokesman for the terrorists warned that it plans to attack America and raise the flag of Allah. Now, we've heard that once before, actually many, many times before, but what's very interesting is they're really pushing this propaganda right now. ABC is out there, and they're reporting that they have photos, which I have on the site if you'd like to see it. All you have to do is go to the episode, click on the show episode, and it'll bring you to another page. And these are all the links to the show. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see the picture of the White House with the Islamic State sign there. And ABC is reporting a photo has emerged via Twitter, which shows a hand holding up an image of the flag of the Islamic State displayed on a smartphone right in front of the White House. A senior U.S. intelligence official told ABC that the use of Twitter is consistent with the Islamic State and all terrorist organizations, because they love to go out on social media and tell you everything that's going on, which is absolutely ridiculous. If there's a real terrorist organization, they would do things in secret. You don't broadcast it around the world. So we kind of know this is propaganda. The group has shown to be at the forefront of social media use among terrorist and militant groups, the officials said. In addition to the White House threat, there was a second photo in the tweet, one dated June 20th, which shows 2 American flags appeared over an arched entryway. And in this photo, they're holding up a note. And the photo also shows a note, and it's from the soldiers of the Islamic State, and they're saying that they will be here soon. The underlying tweet carries the following message: we are in your state. We are in your cities. We are in your streets. So, like I've said in the past, this is propaganda. They already have their teams. When I say they, it's the United States central bankers, teams spread around the country. Remember, they kept the propaganda going, saying that the terrorists are broken up into lone wolf groups. They're around the country. They're getting ready for a terrorist act. We understand the economy is falling apart. They know it. There's no way to stop it. They need to get an event. They need a war started, and they're really pushing their agenda right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.